The views, opinions, and content of this show are those of the host, guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect those of Local Matters Broadcasting, LLC, its owners, partners, affiliates, assigns, or heirs. Having said that, it's now time to say good morning, St. Johns County. Welcome to the weekly radio show, the St. Johns County Council on Aging, better known in our community as the COA. We are your local nonprofit agency who for the past 50 years has been leading and advocating for the dignity, independence, health, and community involvement of older St. Johns County residents. I'm Brian Robinson, Program Director for COA, broadcasting to you live from the studio of WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. Before we get into our show this morning, let me remind everyone that if you have a question, comment, or suggestion for a radio show topic, send your email to radio@coasjc.org. Again, that's radio@coasjc.org. And if you have a question during today's show, feel free to shoot us an email. Again, that's radio@coasjc.org. My email is up in front of me. I'll be monitoring that. And if you have a question, we'll try to work it into the show this morning. My guest this morning is no stranger to those around COA. And that is Megan Wall, managing attorney at St. John's Legal Aid. Good morning, Megan.
Good morning, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. And so you were here last month, and your voice was not as strong then as it is this morning. So glad to see you're feeling better.
It was just strained, actually. Remember, I wasn't even sick. It was just that I had overused it.
Uh-huh.
And then you said, but talking's kind of your thing.
It is kind of. It is very much your thing. Yes. You have the gift of gab, is what some people would say. Yes.
Irish thing, I guess.
Well, very good. Well, thanks for coming on the show again. And we were kind of talking a little bit about maybe what we would talk about this morning. And you suggested talking about homestead in foreclosure. And so first of all, let's start off by educating our listeners on the homestead exemption in case anybody out there doesn't know what that is.
That is a great point. Florida is so unique in that sense. Not very many states have the homestead exemption. In the constitutions of states, there are 50 state constitutions, and that is really solid law. Florida and Texas are the two states that have it in the constitution of the state.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's why, remember that guy, O.J. Simpson?
Mm-hmm. Name rings a bell.
It's funny, I was talking to a high school group the other day, and I mentioned O.J. as an example, and they had no idea who it was.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's making you feel old.
Have you heard of the Beatles? Right? Where are we going here? But he's the great example because you remember that the Goldman family sued him. Mm-hmm. And got an $18 million judgment against him. He had to give his Heisman Trophy to them. He had to give anything of value he had. And his Beverly Hills home, the multi-million-dollar mansion, evaporated into cash, floated over, took a look at Texas. Really wish he would have stopped there. But anyway, came on over to South Florida, right? Mm-hmm. And lived near Jeffrey Epstein and all those nice criminals down there.
Okay.
But the point was his home then, once it was in Florida, was completely exempt from the Goldman family or any other creditors. So there he was flagrantly in his multi-million-dollar mansion, right, in West Palm Beach or wherever it was. And that's just a really bad example of a good law. But my point is, if they couldn't take OJ's home, they can't take our modest homes either. They can't take no creditor that's an unsecured creditor, not connected to the home, like a judgment creditor, a credit card, a medical bill, you owed your brother, he sued you, whatever. Any bill that is not a mortgage or attached to the home cannot touch a homestead in Florida. That's a really big right to have. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that right extends not just while you're alive, but while you're dead. So your home, your homestead, will go straight to your heirs. Free and clear of creditors, free and clear of everything except secured interests. So I hope I'm not going too fast, but secured means it's attached to the house, like a mortgage, right? Mm-hmm. Or like property taxes. A home improvement loan you got that you put your home up as collateral.
Okay.
If you give me a roof or a pool or whatever, I have to pay you or you take my home. Mm-hmm. Homeowner association fees are little monthly mortgages that people are often confused have that much right. But homeowner, if you're in a homeowner's association, which I'm not, but people that agree to that, those are little monthly mortgages. But other than those secured interests, which do pass with the property, so if you get your mom's homestead, it will come with her mortgage and property taxes and stuff like that. But everything else is just an unsecured debt. And no unsecured debtor can take your home in Florida, regardless of the value of your home, not while you're alive and not when you're dead.
And so who is eligible to get the homestead exemption?
Anyone who lives in the home. I think the property appraiser defines it as 51% of the year or more. And you have to declare that it's your homestead. So that's between you and the property office. You know, like if they believe you're really not living there, you're really living in your northern home, or you're really renting it, or you're doing something that could cause you to lose your homestead exemption. But for our purposes, we're talking about people who live in a home and own that home. That's their homestead.
It doesn't matter the age.
The age of the home or the age of the person?
Yeah, the age of the person.
Right, it doesn't matter either one of those. Right, you get a homestead when you move into it. You have to declare it. I mean, we get a big flurry in December because you have to have been in the homestead, you know, the year before. So even December 31st is fine if you moved in. And a lot of times people are buying or doing things like right at the end of the year to try to get that homestead exemption in January.
Okay, so if I was to purchase a home,
yes,
then I could file whatever it is I'm supposed to file to get the homestead exemption.
Declaration of homestead, right?
Okay.
And it gives you a break on your property taxes, right? You don't pay full taxes because you get the homestead exemption. It locks your taxes in. They can only go up 3% a year, right? No matter how your property doubles, triples, you still are going to pay those low taxes. But also what I'm talking about, right, is a different homestead exemption that says no unsecured creditor can take your home. Mm-hmm. You still have a right to live in it, no matter how in debt you are. And that's why I didn't mean to start the morning with O.J. Simpson, so I apologize. People are like, what is that? I don't want to wake up to that. I just meant if a real bad scoundrel like that with millions of dollars in debt over his head saved his multi-million-dollar home, then our homes are also protected. It's a good example to bring out because people really just don't believe you. Mm-hmm. They're like, I'm really in debt. I'm being sued right and left. I got 28 credit cards under thousands of dollars in debt. And my kid had cancer. We've got medical debt. And I say, relax. Just keep your home over your head. Keep the roof over your head, and you will always be okay.
Mm. And that's good to know because of all the scammers that are out there as well, right? Because scammers would use all kinds of different means to try to get money from you. One of them could be to say, hey, if you don't pay X amount of dollars, then we're going to
take your home. They say that.
And you've probably heard that from time to time.
They say it all the time. It's awful. We're going to lien it. It's like, okay. I mean, you can record judgments against homes, but that's not a true lien. A true lien can foreclose. Mm-hmm. And if you can't foreclose, you don't have that right. You're not a true lien. There's even a statute that says we can ask you we can strip it. We can say, look, you either foreclose in the next 30 days or you take that judgment off of there. Mm-hmm. And you could do that before you sell a home, for example. People often sell a home and pay all of those recorded debts. And I tell people, well, you didn't have to. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you could actually, take them all off because they didn't have that right. But the important part about homesteads, too, it's not just the scammers. And by the way, our clerk does have, you can sign up with Brandon Patty at our clerk's office. And if anyone's trying to mess with your deed, you'll get an alert.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's a good thing to sign up for. And you could do it right on the Clerk of Court, St. Johns County website. But the important part about all this is that people often voluntarily gut their home, right? I see those commercials, do you have unsecured debt? Well, you could take out a mortgage and pay that all off. And I start yelling. My husband's like, turn it off. She's going to start yelling.
You start yelling at
I start yelling, don't ever do that. Don't ever give them your home when they're so weak. These little creditors are so weak compared to the protection you have in Florida with your home. And why would you give them that right to have a secured interest in your home? Right? So if need be, do something about unsecured creditors, right? Consolidate it, discharge it in a bankruptcy, set up payment plans, ignore it. Half the time, old people especially, seniors that are on fixed income or disabled people can ignore it. And I'm not suggesting you do that if you have the ability to pay, but some people it's between food and a credit card. So, don't pick the credit card over your own food.
Well, let's go ahead. We're going to take our first break right now. And when we come back, I do want to talk about foreclosure, bankruptcy, things like that. And so we'll go ahead, take our first break. You are listening to the weekly radio show of the St. Johns County Council on Aging. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks. And welcome back to the weekly radio show of the St. Johns County Council on Aging here on WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk, bringing in this segment with a little Guns N' Roses. Welcome to the jungle. And navigating the legal system can be like a jungle sometimes. So we have Megan Wall, managing attorney of St. John's Legal Aid, with us this morning. So welcome back. And so before the break, Megan, we were talking about the homestead exemption. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about as well is foreclosure. So if you're having to foreclose on the house, then how does that tie into the homestead exemption?
Oh, it's huge. If you have a homestead and you're being threatened with foreclosure, it means that you didn't pay that secured interest, right? All of the 3 or 4 I just talked about, and they're the only real ones. Mortgages, homeowner association fees, property taxes, or if you put a lien on your own home for property improvement, right, like a roof or something. If you paid for the roof with a credit card, okay, and you don't pay the credit card, they can't take, it's not secured. But if you put up your home as collateral. So if you're being foreclosed, the good news is, is there good news? The good news is if it's your homestead, you have some protections from that. It takes a long time. You have lots of notice. You have St. Johns County Legal Aid to help you try to get a refinance of your mortgage, right? So that the amounts you've missed, right, the mortgage payments you've missed because of that sick child, loss of job, disability, whatever befell you, right? Something happened. You've missed those payments. We can work to refinance that loan, put the payments to the back, get a lower interest rate sometimes, like things like that to put you back on track with a good payment plan, right? So then you're back in status and the foreclosure is, dismissed. So it's really important to call if you're in foreclosure. And in fact, the clerk of court puts an attachment on the foreclosure. If you don't have an attorney and you need help and this is your home, go to legal aid immediately. Mm-hmm. So the good news is that we can then because in court, the banks might be working with people and they think, well, I've got a settlement with the bank, but the lawyers for the bank are still in court and don't know that. So we've had people walk in who were so confused, like, I had a deal with the bank and we were in a repayment plan and my house got sold on the courthouse steps. Mm. Right hand, left hand, right? Mm-hmm. So we do the right hand while we're working with the bank with the left hand. We're telling the judge you're working with the bank and we're working with slowing that down and making sure it doesn't go to final judgment, doesn't get sold on the courthouse steps, because that becomes a real problem. So you've got to have both hands working together, right? To have a prayer. Mm-hmm. I just put my hands together. It was funny you couldn't see.
And there's various reasons that people get into a situation where they're having to foreclose on a home. Maybe they lost their job, or maybe they got sick, right, and they couldn't work.
Exactly.
Or there's a variety of reasons that people find themselves in that situation. So it's good to know that in that situation, though, they can come to legal aid.
There's hope, exactly. Yeah. And homesteads homesteads are one of the priority things that we do, preventing foreclosures on homesteads, and especially people that have equity or it's worth it. I mean, for a long time, we'd look at it. I guess I don't know if you were here during the downturn economy. What was that 2008, 2009? There was a whole downturn where suddenly all these valuable homes were worthless. Mm-hmm. And so people were extremely underwater, right? That means you owed $200,000 and your home was worth $100,000. Mm-hmm. I mean, and actually it was Obama at that time that did the Obama plan and started this refinancing idea, and people could get at 2% and they could, so then everybody else got on board. And then we started looking at the contracts and realized they have an obligation to offer that mortgage assistance at the bank before they foreclose, and they weren't doing that. So we got to slow down a whole bunch of stuff over that nationwide. People were working on that, And now banks are much more savvy because of all of the pushback during that downturn economy. But it's really important that if you have a home, you remember that how much rents are, and that you really probably have a mortgage that's less expensive than rent, right? At least right now it for sure is. And you've got to hold on to that equity too. And you've got to make sure that you try to have a roof over your head and your family's head, if at all possible. I'm not saying to hold on to something that's a losing proposition. I mean, our mortgage foreclosure counselors will talk about that. Some people do want to just cash in, get the equity, and move to Oklahoma where they can get, a house free and clear for the amount that their equity is. And I get that. St. Johns County is an expensive place to live, to buy a home, to maintain a home, to keep a home. But at least we can be clear, to go back to the first part of our topic, not to gut our own equity. Mm-hmm. I know that money's always tight for a lot of us, and you look to all that home equity like a piggy bank. Maybe I could borrow it. I'm sure I'll have more money later to pay it back. That's what you don't ever want to do. You really want to look into what to do about unsecured debt separate and apart from your homestead. Like, do not think of that as a piggy bank. Think of that as, this is what keeps me from being homeless, right? And you look outside and there are homeless and they're not housed. And it's, now a criminal act to be homeless. And it's a very big divide, and it's getting bigger, right? The homeless and the housed. So try to hang on to that homestead. Even if you need to, what I tell people is, remember to move in your friends and relatives and split the costs if you need to. Mm-hmm. And I mean, people did live communally, and they do in other countries. There's not as big a problem.
So it makes me, as you're talking, I'm thinking other questions are popping in my head, right? So what about somebody who is has a mortgage on their home, can pay the mortgage, but now their insurance rates have gone up, right? And so now they're struggling to pay the insurance on their home. So what happens in that situation? That, like, my understanding, right, in order to have your mortgage, you have to show the bank that you have insurance on your property. So if you're not able to pay the insurance, then the bank can take...
No, the bank places insurance on you.
Okay.
And charges you. And it's usually much more expensive than you could get from, your local Herbie Wiles or whoever you're using locally. Like, you've got to get your own insurance if at all possible. A bank will means they force into place, insurance on your home and charge you and add it as part of your mortgage, your secured mortgage. Okay. And then people are being foreclosed on because they can't pay that. Mm-hmm. But that's a mortgage. So, you want to not let the bank handle that for you. You want to handle it. And you're right, insurance is a whole, and we're all going with that. What did it just double almost? I mean, homeowners insurance is really bad. And that brings up another topic, not quite off topic, but very related. You don't always have to have water insurance, right? Flood insurance. Mm-hmm. But if you are ever in an area that got flooded in the prior storms and FEMA came in and gave you a check, the one thing they asked you to do for that free money was to always keep flood insurance. From then on.
That music means we got to get to our next break. Okay. Hold that thought. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks. And welcome back to the weekly radio show, the St. Johns County Council on Aging, here on WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. A little Van Halen, the song Jump, bringing us into this segment. So let's jump back into it, Megan. We were talking about flood insurance and FEMA and that kind of stuff. So.
I know. So you bring up homes and then all these other ancillary topics, but it's hurricane season. Mm-hmm. And we had hurricanes and flooding here, and people remember that were here, right? Irma, Matthew, people's homes were underwater. Or even if it was a couple inches, that still destroyed your home.
Sure.
So FEMA came through and did a pretty good job. I don't want to be controversial. People say no. But FEMA came in and dumped millions of dollars. They gave checks to homeowners, right? So that brings up, make sure you own your home, make sure it's in your name, make sure you do the probate. Okay, but separate than that, if you were the homeowner, you got written a check. Here you go, like my neighbor, 5 miles down the road from me, underwater. Here you go. Here's $30,000. I think it was $40,000. Fix up your home. New floors, new walls, new sheetrock. But there's one condition. You have to always, always, always maintain flood insurance from this moment forward, or we will never come back and help you again. Mm-hmm. And do you think he did it?
Well, with you asking that, it's making me think he didn't.
Well, and, that's the thing. I mean, everyone has a hard time paying for everything, right? Sure. And so he's just playing the odds. It won't flood again. I'm like, well, flooding once is a big indication that it will flood again.
Sure.
And FEMA told you had to do this. Continuous coverage. So what's going to happen if you flood again? FEMA will not write you another check, ever. And that's going to be a really big deal with our low-income homeowners that just either forgot their part of the promise, couldn't afford it for whatever reasons. When those floods come, our county's going to be in really different circumstances because FEMA did come in. That's federal dollars straight to homeowners. They wrote them checks for outrageous amounts of money. But there was that one condition. So any low-income homeowner I speak to, I go, and do you have flood insurance? Because remember, once you own your own home, there's no more bank, there's no more mortgage, which a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. And especially in Armstrong and Hastings and Flagler Estates, they own it outright. But FEMA came in before. I'm like, do you have flood insurance? I don't have to have it. I don't have a mortgage. I'm like, you don't have to have it except there's no more federal money for you ever. And that's going to be a really big burden then on the county when we have displaced, flooded families that we can't look to FEMA anymore. Mm-hmm. That's going to be, those are really good dollars coming into our county when there's a disaster that the federal government was there to bail us out. So it's not going to be as much bailing next time if people didn't keep that up. And I don't even know, you should have an insurance person on their air sometime about whether you can even buy flood insurance during hurricane season. Because one of my clients, I said, you need to go get it right now. And they said, I can't buy it during hurricane season. So I only have a rumor that that's true, but I haven't tried to purchase it. I always have it. Mm-hmm. And you need the water, you need the wind. If you have only the water, they say it was the wind. If you have only the wind, they say it was the water. Sure. Then you need the regular homeowners because the tree wasn't from the hurricane. It could have fallen anyway. You need 3 different insurances to live in this beautiful county. And it is a lot. It's people that even have their mortgages completely paid off, just have to keep up those 3 insurances. And when they let that go, it's like letting a lot of things go. It's going to come back to haunt you, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's circle back if we could. So we were talking about foreclosures. So let's just go to a situation where the person owns the home.
Yes.
Right? But let's say that they've gotten themselves into a situation where they've accumulated a lot of what you call unsecured debt, right? So,
yes.
So they've racked up some credit cards.
Medical bills.
Things like that. Mm-hmm. And let me just say, just from personal experience, right? When I was in West Virginia, I was a pastor of a church, a small church, did not pay me much money. I worked a second job. But in spite of that, we were still low income, right? And so sad to say, we had to depend on credit cards for things that we needed from time to time. Right?
You're not the first person. This is a very common scenario.
A car repair,
sure.
Something, a large appliance purchase that you need for the home. We weren't racking up credit card debt because we were taking trips around the world, right? Or buying big screen TVs or things like that. It was because we were trying to survive.
Groceries. You're buying groceries with your Visa card, exactly.
And before you know it, you have thousands and thousands of dollars on your credit cards, and you can't make the payment.
Well, they gouge you.
They do.
They jack it up to 29, 39% interest, which should be illegal.
And I'm just going to be transparent. I've personally had to go through a bankruptcy because of that situation.
That's what it's there for.
And I struggled with that, meaning, I'm a type of person that I feel that I should pay back what I owe. Right?
Sure.
But like you said, it's kind of stacked against you because the interest rates are so high on the credit cards, and it's just like you feel like you can never get ahead. And then I tried this program where you pay them and then they try to work out a deal with the credit card company.
Oh, they're almost all ripoffs.
Yeah.
Almost all, yeah.
And then finally, we just finally went and we saw an attorney and we filed bankruptcy.
That's right.
And here's the interesting thing about it, right? A week after my bankruptcy, I started getting credit card offers from the same credit card companies that were part of my bankruptcy.
Of course.
So here I was worrying about paying them. Now I'm not saying don't pay your credit card bill. I'm not trying to promote that at all. But I'm just saying that here I was really, really wanting to do the right thing.
Yes.
And that credit card company out there could care less.
They're doing great.
Right? The bankruptcy was filed. It was settled. They said, okay, here, we'll give you another credit card. Now, the interest rate will be astronomical, right?
Sure.
But we would like to do that for you. So let's say somebody's in that situation. They own their home, but they're having to file bankruptcy. You're saying that the home doesn't have to be part of that. They can keep their home.
Absolutely. The homestead goes through. You get to keep it. Just like you get to keep your burial funds and your retirement accounts and your home furnishings and your grandmother's, china. And I mean, unless there's something that has an incredible amount of value, you get to keep your essentials. And bankruptcy is our law. I mean, this isn't an illegal thing to do. It's legal for them to charge you 39% interest. And in fact, there's no limit on how much interest they can charge you because the Supreme Court said it's where the company houses itself. And they all went to Delaware and these places deregulated. So we have clients coming in with 104% interest. I mean, outrageous. So yes, they keep gouging, and the more vulnerable you are, and the more you're at one time late on a payment or struggling, they don't work with you. Instead, they just gouge you further and try to jack the interest rates up as high as possible. So that all should be illegal, but that's perfectly legal. But the only way out really is to start fresh.
Hold that thought. We got to go to another commercial break. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
There's never
Little Sweet Home Alabama to bring us into this next segment. We're not in Alabama, but we are in St. Johns County, and this is the weekly radio show of the St. Johns County Council on Aging here on WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. Joined today by Megan Wall, the managing attorney for St. John's Legal Aid. Prior to our commercial break, we were talking about bankruptcy. If you want to continue your thoughts on that.
I want to talk about who picked all this great music. Sweet Home Alabama. I mean, you got the best music. You just want to have
good music. Absolutely.
Dance party
the
in
station
here.
owner plugged it in there. So
shout out to
I don't know how to change it. So it is there for every COA radio show that we ever do.
Great. Good choices. Good choices. So speaking of making good choices, when is bankruptcy a good choice? Bankruptcy is federal law. It's allowed, and it was part of our system of justice in the U.S. because people, as we remember back in England, you would go to prison for debts, right? Mm-hmm. And you'd go to the stockades, and you'd be stuck for life. You could never get out from under it. You could never start over. You could never be a productive member of society, paying your taxes, working. You were just stuck, right, or imprisoned. And our founding, they were all fathers. The founding fathers said that's not a way to go. We've got to get a get out of jail free card. Like, this is just, you got to start fresh. Got to start fresh and build your life back up and build your family back up and be a productive, healthy, happy, tax-paying person, right? And that's, so it's because anything could befall anybody, and especially those who are not born into money, born into inheritances, born into all of that. I mean, if you see extreme wealth, it's, those of us that didn't get that from the get-go kind of are born into poverty. Mm-hmm. And debt makes debt, just like money makes money. People are making money on money that aren't even trying. And people are making debt on debt, that are trying really hard, and they don't know why it keeps ballooning and expanding. And it's like the blob, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And we're talking about, people that work really hard at a wage, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs. And you cannot get ahead, right? Because it's stacked against you. And you don't have that inheritance. You don't have those big influxes of, my friends and I mean, when we started out, we paid for our own college. We had debt right off the bat, and working 2 jobs and going to college. and we have everything else is, car. We're paying for it. Parents didn't give us a car. I remember the kid down the street had a bow on it on his 16th birthday, a brand new Trans Am with a bow, and we're a family of 9, from a military father doing his best, did fine, did great, never went without, but didn't have enough to give us, even used cars. I mean, we had to all share one station wagon and second family car. And I mean, you're just, it's not that wealth makes you happy, but it does make it easier. Mm-hmm. And you've got to find a way to make your life livable, and it's not about guilt or whatever. It's about strategy, and there are people that, do business bankruptcies. We've had people in the White House. They do business bankruptcies over and over and over. Don't give it a second thought, and you and I are struggling to our heart, we really want to pay. And, we feel badly. They're doing fine. I just want you to know, banks, credit cards, they're doing fine. And we've repaid for that refrigerator, 300 times over, and we still have the same debt or 10 times bigger debt. Mm-hmm. And really, if they would charge an honest interest rate, then we would pay an honest bill, and the world would be a better place. And in fact, I remember a couple thousand years ago, a young boy going into money lenders' tables, kicking them over and saying, "Not in my Father's house," right? And we base our religion on that man, or a lot of us do, right? And who was that? Jesus, who said there should not be this usurious interest rate. You shouldn't be able to loan money to desperate people and then charge exorbitant interest rates. It's unchristian. It's immoral. It's unethical. And yet it's going on all the time. And who feels bad about not paying? They should feel horrible about doing that to us, the little person, right, in America. And we should not allow policies or people in any of our state legislatures to do that to little people, right? So thank goodness, yes, there is at least an option to start fresh. And remember, 90% of bankruptcies are from medical debt. Mm-hmm. We don't have coverage, and usually from a child's medical debt. You're responsible for the debts of your children, and it's not your fault your child got cancer. It's not your fault, something happened. But we feel bad that we can't pay it, right? So bankruptcy, thank goodness, is at least like a start over fresh program for you to become a productive citizen again, and pay your mortgage instead of, unsecured credit cards. And so it's important. It's a kind of a one-time in your life thing when you fell on hard times. You can do it more often, but the first time is more what you're thinking of is the model. It's a guarantee. It's a discharge. If you can set up a repayment, they throw you into that other kind of bankruptcy where you repay. So one's a 7, one's a 13. And you don't have to know all that as a customer. You just have to know to go to a professional, a lawyer, and talk about whether it makes sense. But it is an important thing to do. And families, sick children, people that fall in hard times, people that become disabled, yes, you get to keep your home, your burial funds, your retirement accounts, your automobile generally. If it's worth anything, you have to usually buy it back out of the, for $1,000 or whatever your used Toyota's worth. But I mean, it's important to be able to go and start fresh, but keep that home. Mm-hmm. Do not gut your equity out of your home to pay those unsecured credit cards instead. Mm-hmm. And then you're homeless and in the street and saying, who's going to house me? Who's going to help me and my family? And everyone's turning a blind eye to that, right? Mm-hmm. Not our problem. You house yourself, right? Well, okay, maybe if you didn't. Anyway, I won't keep going on about how bad the credit card interest rates are, but they really are. Oh,
absolutely. So bankruptcy, can people come to legal aid? Is that something you guys
They can.
handle?
They can come to legal aid. We have volunteer lawyers that do bankruptcy. We have other places that we can refer people. So it's absolutely somewhere that you can come and ask about it. And we try to get those referrals out. Bankruptcy lawyers are pretty good about taking a few cases a year each. Mm-hmm. Although bankruptcies are very affordable. I mean, from the people that say it, they're looking at whether or not you have $2,000 to pay the bankruptcy lawyer. Mm-hmm. So sometimes people can pay for that. The consolidated stuff, though, that you were talking about are almost all scams, except CCCS, Consumer Credit Counseling Services. That was the original one. That's the only legitimate one. And even that's sometimes not a good idea. that consolidating them and trying to do the repayment. All the other ones out there also preying on the poor, also fraudulent. People have paid $5,000-$10,000 to them, and if you read the fine print, that all goes to them, not one penny to the credit cards yet. And if you read it, so people pay so many thousands of dollars to those companies. They're almost all fraudulent.
Right. Yeah.
Don't do those.
And I discovered that. So in this instance, they reached out to one of my credit card companies. They were willing to settle for like $5,000 less than what I owed, but I had to pay cash like right then. And I was like, okay, listen, if I had that amount of cash, I wouldn't be working through you. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
So it's a struggle. And I will say from personal experience, the filing bankruptcy was a lot easier than what I expected. It does, certainly have its repercussions afterwards, right? I mean, you have to wait a certain amount of years before you could get a home loan and so forth. I think FHA, is 2 years. 2 years. 2 years for
yeah,
FHA.
they know you can't discharge again for a long time.
Yeah. So
in fact, Anina LaFleur in town does a lot of bankruptcies for us. She's a good bankruptcy lawyer. And I like that she takes so much pro bono work, for free for us. And she'll also analyze cases for us. So, I mean, I can't think of all of the other ones now that might be helping regionally, but definitely, I would personally go. I mean, I shouldn't tell you who does pro bono work, but it's a public record.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, we just have a couple minutes left. I wanted to make sure that folks know when you're speaking at one of our locations.
Oh, that's right. On the 30th, I speak once a month at your location, all the other COAs too, which you run. But I'm speaking at the River House on the 30th of August at 10 o'clock in that beautiful room that you give us there in the River House on probate. What is probate? Is it a dirty word? Should you avoid it at all costs? What should you do to avoid it? It's a very fascinating topic because most people have no idea what it is.
Sure.
They think they know what it is. It's the boogeyman. It should be avoided, but we really don't know the details.
All right. Well, great. So we appreciate you coming to
Thanks
all
for
of
having
our
me.
different locations and educating those who attend. You come, seems like every Friday to COA.
I do.
And you meet with clients who are, typically seniors, helping them navigate whatever legal issues that they're dealing with. And so we appreciate your flexibility to be willing to travel around and come on the show this morning and talk about this topic. And
Thank you for having me. It was fun.